In today's show, the first of our season previews for the 2024-2025 season. It's a player profile. And first up, Deni Avdija. Welcome to Locked On Blazers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You are listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Available wherever you get podcasts. Coming at you 3 days a week for the next couple weeks. The first 2 weeks of September, we're still 3 days a week. So September 16th, we'll be back to 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, as we get closer to the season. And as we're getting closer to the season, it's time to begin our player profiles leading up to the beginning of the season. I've been doing this for 4 years. It is our Locked On Blazers countdown to tip-off. We're running down every player on the roster. I'm going to give you a brief but thorough look at what they'll bring to the Blazers. We'll look at how they performed last season, how they wound up on the Blazers. We'll talk best and worst case scenarios for the upcoming year, and we'll finish the episode talking expectations and likely role on the team this season. This is our first one. We're going to run through everybody on the season. Media Day is about a month away as we get going, and we're probably not going to wrap them all up by Media Day, but before the beginning of the season starts, we'll have them all wrapped up, and it's great, hopefully evergreen content for you in the summertime if you're just kind of introducing a friend to the show, or if you want to get caught up in all of them at any point. We're going to start with Deni. I'll make a little playlist for you on YouTube if you want to watch them all, and we'll run through everybody on the team. The first one, though, today, we're talking turbo. It's full speed ahead into a Deni Avdija player profile. Today's show, all Deni talk. Here's how these work. I've been doing them for 4 years. This will be year number 4 of doing them. I think they're pretty useful because it's like setting the stage where way back in September, what was our view, and then as you head into, we revisit these at the end of the season. The Blazers, of course, are going to be playing into June, so we'll revisit them after the NBA Finals in June or April. Either one, it'll either be the second week of April or June, and we kind of get a good gauge of where I stood on players, and I try to be honest and with my approaches, and that way if I got it way wrong in one direction or the other, we can talk about why, or I can discuss why I was maybe wrong. But let's start with Deni and start with what he did last season, his 4th season in the NBA, 4th season with the Wizards. 14.7 points per game, 7.2 rebounds, 3.8 assists across 75 games, all starts. Those are all career highs. Shot 50.6% from the floor, including 37.4% from 3 on 3.1 attempts per game from 3. Not a ton of volume, but the best accuracy of his career by far after hovering in the low 30s for the first 3 seasons of his career, and 74% from the free throw line. That's his slash line. That's his numbers. He started a little bit slow. Like, this was a breakout year for Deni for sure, but it didn't, early on in the season, he showed some flashes, and then he kind of had a quieter December, and then he took off in January and had a really strong February, including a 43-15 game at New Orleans right before the All-Star break, 43 points, 15 boards. It was like, oh, yeah, this dude can really play. And then after the All-Star break and into March, he played really well. He was slightly less efficient at the very end of the year, but he was good in March. In April games are weird, and he only played 6 or 7 of them, and he was a little bit worse efficiency-wise. But that second half of the year, including really strong months in February and March, was the best Deni has ever played in the NBA. And if you probably heard about Deni and heard me mention him, and maybe you've quickly like peeked at his box scores on Basketball Reference or wherever you get your career numbers, and you probably think like what made Deni's season so special last year was the uptick in shooting accuracy. And you are correct. He shot a career best 37.4% from 3, but he also had the lowest 3-point rate of his career. Early in his career, when he was kind of a non-shooter, he was sort of relegated to be a spacer, even though he wasn't maybe cut out to be that. But it was like, hey, that's what your role is going to need to be in the league. You got to figure it out. Deni said himself that the offseason heading into year 4, he really focused on his 3-point shooting, but he just took less. He made more, but it was on low volume. He kind of started to pick his spots better. I think maybe the smartest thing about Deni's season is that he said, I got to get better at this. okay, I am better at this, but I don't need to push it. Like, I don't need to push it to a crazy level because that's not what's going to make me special. But I have to become a better shooter. He did become a better shooter. But that was a big part of his leap. But to me, looking a little bit closer, what made his season special was that his frequency of getting to the rim took a massive leap, and his finishing went along with it. He had a career high in percentage of field goal attempts at the rim and career best finishing numbers. Deni, who is a slasher at his purest form, was the best version of him, and the Wizards played really fast, so that helps. He gets some. They played, they play in transition about as much as any team in the league, among the top 5 teams in the league in transition attempts, on transition frequency all year long, and Deni's a big part of that because he can grab and go. But the career high in percentage of his field goal attempts, so the number of shots relative to all of his field goals that he took at the rim, and career best finishing numbers. When you do that, when you shoot better from 3 than you ever have, right? When you shoot better from 3 than at any point in your career, and you get to the rim more often, and you make layups and score at the rim better than you have in a career, that's why you're going to take a leap. The most important shots in the NBA are still layups. Threes are incredibly important. Everyone is shooting more threes, right? But like, the thing that everyone is trying to do is shoot more threes to open up the paint. We're trying to create more space, trying to leverage threes to create layups. And what made Deni's season so special was that ability to get to the rim. His simple splits, like if you just look at like pre and post All-Star, make it look like he was way better after the All-Star break than before it. And that's true too. He was a little less efficient on higher volume, and I think that is, so his counting numbers are better post All-Star break, but his efficiency numbers are a little bit worse. But I kind of think that's a good and bad sign. Like, in a perfect world, as a dude would scale up and take more shots and have the ball in his hands more, his efficiency would go right with it, and he'd be on a perfect path to being a star, right? Like, the trajectory would be so clean. But that's not typically how it works. Typically, when guys get more opportunities, get the ball in your hands more, have a higher usage rate, you're going to take more shots, you can dribble more, you're going to turn the ball over more, you're going to set guys up more, like everything about it, you're just going to have more responsibility on offense. Typically, your efficiency dips, and Deni's dipped a little bit. Most players get less efficient on higher volume. And so maybe why I said it's good and bad is like, it's the sort of the whatever glass half empty read is like, yeah, maybe there's a cap on what Deni's like actual star level can be. But I think what the glass half full read is like, sure, he was way higher usage and more opportunity and all of those things. And it wasn't like he dropped off a cliff. He was just a little bit less efficient. That's probably a really good sign for a 23-year-old kind of getting that level of usage for the first time in his career. Without a doubt, Deni Avdija had the best season of his NBA career. He doesn't turn 24 until January, and he's under contract at what's likely to be a well below market for a player of his skill set, a well below market deal for the next 4 years. Coming off the best year of his career, not yet 24 years old, under team control for 4 and potentially longer than that, 4 more seasons. This was a player the Blazers, very clearly targeted and acquired. They got him on a draft day trade. So that's what his season was. How did he end up in Portland? They got him on a draft day trade. They traded what was their 2024 pick and the second least favorable of their 3 2029 picks. They have 3, their own, Milwaukee and Boston. So depending on kind of where those teams finish, the Blazers will give the middle of their 3 picks in 2029. And obviously it could get a little dicey if they trade some other picks and there'll be protections sent here and there. But it's going to be the third most favorable of those 2029 picks. 2 firsts, 2 second rounders, and Malcolm Brogdon in order to acquire Deni Avdija. I've mentioned this on the show before, and I'll just repeat it here because I think it's worth repeating in the player profile. I think that price, in terms of just market price for a player of Deni Avdija's skill set, a guy who can pass, a guy who can dribble, a guy who's a really good defender, who had the best shooting season of his career and improved his efficiency at the rim, that price seems reasonable, right? 2 first-round picks, a veteran who can play a little bit, and some second-rounders to make it happen. I think the price in general is very believable that that's what it costs to get Deni Avdija on your team. I think he's going to be a helpful part of the Blazers team. I'm a little bit surprised the Blazers were the team to pay that price. But it doesn't mean that Deni won't help. And that's what I want to talk about in the second segment. What we do here is the best and worst case scenarios. There's best case scenario within reason and worst case scenario without injury. So let's talk about best and worst case scenarios for Deni Avdija in the second segment. Join me there, won't you? First, though, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. If you're a longtime listener to the program, you've heard me tell you about FanDuel a whole bunch. It's America's #1 sportsbook, and that remains true. But I got something a little bit different for you, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers, new, old, returning, first-timers, whatever it might be, you can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. So the NFL season starts. You are listening to Wednesday, September 4th's show. The NBA, on Thursday, September 5th, the NFL season starts. It's here. Football has arrived along with college football. If you place a bet on FanDuel, you unlock your 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. All you got to do is have a YouTube TV base plan. Then you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game with your free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. You're going to be able to watch the Blazers on YouTube TV, so maybe this is your chance to switch over and get that 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket. Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right. So let's talk best and worst case scenarios. What we do here is we try to set the polls. The idea is that everyone is going to land in the middle of the polls. I try to set them. The tagline here is within reason and without injury. So we're not, I think everyone's best case scenario is something like Defensive Player of the Year, MVP, Finals MVP, right? But they're within reason. We're not talking about trophies and things like that for guys who can't. For guys who are unlikely to be in the MVP conversations, within reason and without injury. The worst case scenarios are things that happen on the basketball court, right? Like I think that's sort of the parameters we're setting. Things that happen in the lines, not your body breaking down. So with that said, what's the best case scenario for Deni Avdija? It's that he answers all of the Blazers' questions. The player that they traded for and acquired to be their starting forward is exactly the answer to all the questions this team poses. That is, who's going to add secondary playmaking? Deni Avdija. Who's going to add additional shooting on the wing? Deni Avdija. Who's going to add additional and valuable point of attack defense? Deni Avdija. Who's going to add a ruggedness and a toughness we were missing? Deni Avdija. Who's going to unlock our transition attack that we really wanted to get to last year and for a variety of reasons never did? Yeah, Deni Avdija. He's the one. The best case scenario for Deni Avdija is that the shooting continues in the positive direction that it went in year 4. After hovering around in the low 30s for the first 3 years of his career, he made the leap to 37% three-point shooting in his 4th season. The bulk of that came because he was nails from the corners. Corner three-pointers are off-ball shots. You don't dribble into corner threes. They're mostly assisted. They're mostly open. They're defense. They're spacing shots. They're defense breaker shots. They're you stand in the corner to help your teammates. And Deni Avdija made dang near half of them. Shot in the high 40s, 46% from the corners, according to Cleaning the Glass. The best case scenario is he continues to shoot that well from 3. He didn't shoot great on above the break threes, but above the break threes are more challenging. They're often they're pull-up threes. You don't get as many catch and shoot looks. But the best case scenario is that he improves a little bit on above the break threes. He continues to be absolutely nails from the corners, and he ups his volume from 3 ever so slightly, probably up to his career average in terms of 3-point rate, 3-point frequency, and maintains a very similar shooting percentage. So he's an above average 3-point shooter. And the best case scenario is that with that above average shooting, he continues to be a beast getting to the rim. He was good in transition. Again, he was shooting north of 70% at the rim and getting to the rim at the highest rate of his career. The highest percentage of his free throws, highest percentage of his field goals in his career were at the rim. Like, he was taking more shots at the rim than any point in his career last season and making them. And the best case scenario is that he continues his 3-point progress. And he's been a good defender pretty much from the moment he was in the league. Like, he wasn't elite or whatever as a rookie, but it was like clearly he was going to be a good defensive player, and the question was, what else can he do? And then over the last 4 seasons, it's like he's continued to be a high-level defensive player. He is the best case scenario is that he's that and more, and that as he grows in and it grows comfortable in what the Blazers want to do and with his teammates, and just more NBA experience, he recognizes patterns, he recognizes his opponents more often, and the best case scenario is that he is a two-way beast. The best case scenario for the Deni Avdija is that he finishes higher in the MIP voting this season than he did last year, because he has a second year 5 breakout. If you thought year 4 was good, you're going to love the second act in year 5. He was 6th in MIP voting in last season. I think he's going to have a pretty sizable opportunity for the Blazers. MIP offense matters a bunch, right? You got to score to get those MIP votes. I think Denny's going to have a bunch of opportunity to be a secondary playmaker, to be a primary defender, to be a guy who can complement his teammates by playing off the ball, who can toggle on the ball and be versatile on both ends of the floor. And the best case scenario is that if Deni does all of those things, he not only answers all the questions the Blazers pose, because really a lot of their weaknesses this season, Deni Avdija in theory checks that box. The best case scenario is that he's, after finishing 6th in MIP voting a year ago, he climbs up into the top 5. Maybe he's a finalist even in the top 3. Maybe he wins the dang thing, because the opportunity is there and the talent is there. It's hard to do it twice, but Avdija, if he continues the trend that he set last season, the best case scenario is that he's even better in his first season in the Portland Trail Blazers uniform. So what's the worst case scenario for Deni Avdija? It's that he's just not quite that. He's useful, but he is not the solution. I don't think there's a world in which Deni Avdija is like all of a sudden a bench player on the Trailblazers, right? You look at their roster, you look at his sort of skill set, you look at what they gave up to trade for him, you look at his age, like he's going to play, they're going to carve out minutes for him. I don't think there's a situation where it's all of a sudden like, yeah, Deni plays 20 minutes a night and like comes off the bench for 8 of the 14 games in January or whatever it is, right? Like he's, I don't think there's a world in which he gets pushed out like that. There is a world where he plays a little bit less because of the 3 guards, but mostly the worst case scenario is that Deni Avdija is clearly answers some, but not all of the questions. And while he is a useful part and then like clearly a useful player, I think that's the worst case scenario. He remains a very useful player, but he's just not the solution. The shooting doesn't get there because the Blazers offense is not as wide open and doesn't play as fast as they did in Washington. He doesn't get to the rim as often. That rim frequency goes down. He plays more in the half court. And so his just general effectiveness drops a little bit. And with, a slight dip in shooting back to his career averages and a little more forced to play in the half court because you're not getting stops and you're not prioritizing running, then Avdija looks kind of like he did in the year 3 and more like he did in year 4. The worst case scenario is that Deni Avdija is a interesting role player on a bad basketball team, as opposed to clearly a solution for a team that could build with him going forward. I think it's pretty narrow for Deni, but it's wider than many players on this team because of the change of scenery factor. Some guys, and particularly veteran guys, for the most part, NBA players make the biggest leaps in their career when they're relatively young, right? Like the age 19 to 22 is a bigger leap than age, 24 to 27 in terms of like adding stuff to your skill set. Obviously, players get better and like your physical prime, a lot of people think starts in like that 26, 27 age range. So Avdija is maybe still approaching that level of contribution. But whereas vets, like guys with his level of experience who are entering their 5th year in the league, are usually closer to a finished product. I would say generally speaking, it's like, well, you kind of know what you're going to get with them. You know that it's going to be relatively narrow. Their best case scenario and their worst case scenario are not that far apart. For Deni, I think it's a little bit wider because there's a whole question of fit, right? Can he play a bunch of power forward? I kind of think he's totally fine as an NBA power forward. I might even think he's just like, that's his more natural position in the league. But the Blazers have Jeremy Grant. So it's not really about positions necessarily. It's how does he play next to Jeremy Grant? Does he complement him? Can Deni's ability to rebound, which he's a much better rebounder than JG, can that be valuable to have those two play together and it is effective? Can Deni play in small ball lineups with the three guards? How does Deni Avdija play next to Toumani Camara? Do those guys complement each other? Like, there are some unknowns that I think if the fit is clunky or it's just, or if it's challenging in a variety of ways, there's a world in which his worst case scenario is further away from his best case scenario. Like, I think he has a wider array of outcomes because of the unknown about fit. I also think that the Blazers, the Wizards, particularly, after Kyle Kuzma got hurt and he was, and then maybe not hurt, but like sitting the rest of the season, Deni had the ball in his hands a bunch. And I think he'll get plenty of opportunities with the ball in his hands with the Blazers, but the Wizards played really fast. The Blazers were not a team that ran with much frequency last year. Hopefully they are, like an above average, or at least like right around league average in terms of transition frequency. If they're bottom 5 in transition frequency again, you're just not getting the most out of Deni Avdija. And I think one of the ways that like he might hit his worst case scenario is just if the team doesn't have a plan that fits his skill sets. The best teams tailor their plan around the skills that they have on the roster and not vice versa. And so hopefully the Blazers will see this skill. They'll see a guy, and I think the best version of Deni is a guy who plays in transition, a guy who plays fast. He's fast, he's strong, he's physical, like he can handle, right? Like, let him go in the open floor. But I think there is a world in which the worst case scenario hits because they just don't run that much, and more half court Deni is worse. That's just going to be almost certainly the truth unless he gets a lot better. I will say the other sort of weakness and worst case scenario thing is like Deni's in-between game is not great. Really good at the rim and improved a bunch as a three-point shooter in year 4, but he's never been a mid-range guy. He's never been a guy who has that sort of in-between game. Get all the way to the rim, good passer, good defender, and improved shooter in his 4th season, but he's never been a mid-range pull-up guy. He's never been much of a floater king. He's adding that in-between game is helpful, particularly in the half court, because you can't always get all the way to the rim in the half court. Teams are loaded up to stop you, and if you are going to be a slasher and an attacker, having some counters in the mid-range to go to and using your touch there is really valuable. Let's talk role and expectations. That's what we do to close the show in these previews, is talk what the role for Deni is pretty simple, but I want to talk expectations and Deni's future on the roster. Join me in that third segment, won't ya? Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond. You are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Let's talk Deni's role. This one's simple. He's going to start at one of the forward spots. Whether he's the small forward or power forward will probably depend on who he guards on any given night, but he's going to play one of the forward spots next to Jeremy Grant. I think Jeremy Grant is nominally the power forward because he's not as fleet of foot on defense. He's a better in a help defender role, which is more of a power forward-y type role on defense. And Avdija it can be a better point of attack defender. Like, he can guard guards a little bit. So he's a pretty versatile defender. So I think nominally Deni is your small forward and Jeremy Grant is your 4. Functionally, though, it's like, what are those positions, right? Like, you got to complement each other. I think it's much more about fit and role and who guards who and what do they do. If Deni guards, 2 guards, but he rebounds at a higher level, what position does he play? I think the positions are a little bit murky, but roles still matter. And Deni's role is probably going to be secondary playmaker, some primary defensive responsibilities, and he's going to have to help on the glass because they are a bad rebounding team, and he has some rebounding chops. Expectations. I have pretty high expectations for Deni. Like, if I had to guess, right, why I set the sort of best and worst case scenarios is because I think everybody will finish in the middle. With Deni, I kind of think because he had maybe the best shooting season of his career, he's likely to shoot a little bit worse. That's kind of the nature of it. Like, the first 3 seasons are probably a better indicator than just a single season. But I do think he's going to get more opportunity. I think I think his skill level improved. And I think just beyond the shooting, if he can continue to be a slasher and a smart playmaker, I think he has a much better chance of landing towards his best case scenario just because of the opportunity he's going to get. There's not a world for me. I have a hard time seeing a situation in which the Blazers don't carve out 30 minutes for Deni, right? Like, because they're not going to, like, they're just not going to play Tumani a whole bunch of minutes over him. And then the young wings, Chris Murray and Matisse and Jabari Walker, and not to mention Matisse Thybulle, young vet, like, they're not going to leapfrog him in the pecking order. If Deni's healthy and Deni's available, he's going to play, and I wouldn't be surprised if he plays, he has a clean 30 minutes a night booked, and it could be more than that. And he's going to have those opportunities. Deni is, like I said, the theoretical version of Deni answers a lot of questions. They need his skill sets. They really do. They really do. And if he continues to improve, he's going to be incredibly valuable. The question is, what is sort of his, I think the question to be answered this season is, what do you think Deni's ceiling is, right? Because if his ceiling is like really high, like really good role player, that's super, super, super useful, right? Every team needs really good role players. But if his ceiling is higher than that, if it becomes clear that Deni is like, maybe not clear, but if he plays at a level in which it hints that he could be more than that, right? Like he could be something like, I'm the second best player on a very good team, then Deni is like, then the calculation changes a lot, right? And I think that's why Deni's like outcomes are relatively wide. I think he probably more has like complementary player skills, because he's not like this like crazy isolation scorer or really, really good in the half courts. And he's not like a throw you the ball, go get a bucket type of offensive player. He's a really good connector and passer. I think he does a really good job. And I've seen him do this a bunch on Washington. Is like drive and throw a pass behind him. I knew I just vacated the top of the key. Someone's going to fill in behind me. That's sort of a natural NBA action. I'm going to kick it back to him and set him up for a clean and easy jump shot. He makes pretty good decisions at full speed in transition. He's aggressive. Like he has more complementary skills, at least right now in his career, than like obvious like star skills, like, dribble into a bucket type of skills. Every team needs high level role players. Deni Avdija seems like a dude who could, like, why I thought like the price the Blazers paid to trade for him is like a price that a lot of teams might want to trade, because he's 23, not yet 24, a versatile, big physical ball handler playmaker who improved as a shooter. Like every team needs that type of player. But I think the question is, what in year one, and there's no like real pressure here because he's under contract for 4 seasons. In year one, does Deni hint at being, is he more like the fourth best player on any team in the league, or is he more like, okay, this dude could be like the second option on a really good team? Like, what do you see from him? And I think that can kind of inform the decisions to be made in the future. And I think that's crucial for the Blazers. One thing I want to correct that I've been wrong about this year, and speaking of Deni Avdija's future, is I've mentioned that he's basically impossible to retain. He's not impossible to retain. He's unlikely to sign a contract extension because he is his max raise is 75%, according to my read of the current CBA. His max raise is 75% of his contract, but his contract starts high and goes low. It's a descending deal. So the final year of his deal is only like $11.5 million. A 75% raise on that, like it's 175% raise. So it's like you get to tack on another 75% more. It's like, is that going to be enough to keep him in 26, 27 or however far down the line that is, 27, 28? In 4 years, I think the cap might have just like salaries it's supposed to jump up 10%. The salary cap line is supposed to jump up 10% in each of the next 3 seasons. Like starter money is going to be like in the high 20s, right? Like they're just going to be really big contracts. So Deni, based on the way his contract is set up, is pretty unlikely to sign a contract extension with the Blazers, because he could, certainly, but I think it's relatively unlikely. And this is the thing I've been wrong about. They can sign him to a contract once he's a free agent. There won't be, because of the length of his deal, 4 years, they have his full bird rights, which means that they can go over the salary cap to retain him. And once he enters free agency, they could sign him to a freaking max if they want to. Like, he could make as much money as he possibly wants, and the Blazers will have his full bird rights and be able to do so because of the length of his contract. I screwed that up in some earlier episodes, and I apologize. I don't mind having my opinions be incorrect, but being factually incorrect is something that I don't like doing on the show, because hopefully I'm making you a smarter fan, or at least making it more fun to be a Trailblazers fan. So when I've said repeated things that are just like wrong, I apologize. But so while he's unlikely to sign a contract extension, when he enters free agency, the Blazers will be able to pay him more money than anyone else with bigger raises, and they'll be able to go over the salary cap to do so. So if Deni balls out over the next 4 seasons with the Blazers, they can give him they can back up the Brinks truck or whatever is a Brinks truck still a reference people use? They can give him the biggest bag imaginable. And so if the Blazers, if Deni is a star, like I said, like if Deni if he looks like, if he's a really high level role player, great. You might want to re-sign him to a fat contract because really high-level role players are the bread and butter of good teams. The Blazers will still be searching for a star, but having really good, versatile role players, particularly at the forward spots, incredibly valuable, right? But if he's more than that, the Blazers will not be in danger of leaving. He will be an unrestricted free agent. He'll be able to go where he wants to go, but increasingly the league looks like a place where teams who have access to bird rights and access to signing their guys, player retention has become more common across the NBA. Particularly, we'll see how the second apron stuff plays out. Maybe the NBA killed free agency except for the tippy top guys who you clear out for. And I don't think, unless Deni has a really big breakout, he's not going to be a tippy top guy. And if he does, the Blazers can just offer him the max possible money, and hopefully he chooses to stay. That is going to do it for our first player preview. I'm super excited to watch Deni this year. I think he's one of the most, one of the most intriguing players in the roster. He's, certainly they're basically their only addition this summer. Certainly other than Klingon, like their only veteran addition this summer. This is like a player that they clearly went after and have made a role for, and he's going to get a bunch of opportunity. And I'm so intrigued to see what he can be, because the best version of him is really, really, really helpful. And he's still young and has a chance to be even better than the best version we have seen so far. I'm not going to do player previews every single show for the rest of September, but we're going to trickle these out over the next couple weeks. So we'll get to all. There's the Blazers currently have even a more full roster with Devontae Graham. We'll get to everybody as we get into training camp over the next month. But this one is the start of it. Come back for a bunch more. We do these 3 days a week for the next couple weeks, and they're back to 5 days a week. Available on all platforms, free wherever you get podcasts, and on YouTube. Tell your friends about the program. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.